Hello, Lauren Schaller here, and I'm going to talk to you about observations as a data collection method. How would I describe this technique? You're seeing something directly and recording what you're observing. I like that Mertler explained that observation is different from just watching something that happened. It's about systematically recording what you're seeing and carefully watching. There's a purpose to it. I thought that was a good point. Something that makes this different is I'm going to mention this later with the citation, but the participants of the study and a lot of the other techniques can record, and they themselves are telling you what they want you to know for the study, but in this case, they're not. So they might not even be aware of exactly what the observer or researcher is recording. You're writing notes or typing them or somehow recording what is happening, and it can be done digitally. And I think that what makes observation special is that the observer has to try and keep an open mind and separate themselves from the situation to fully understand everything that's going on, and try to be objective and not let their own bias get in the way. So, what makes this technique different from the others? Again, participants are not directly responding to questions. They might be in the course of teaching that's happening, but which may or may not be what's directly written down, but it's not. The researcher has much more control over what is included in the data, and that kind of reiterates what I was just saying. Mills points out that in this case, the researcher is actually participating and much more involved in the research and with the participants. And you get to choose how much you can record. You have a lot of control, and there's a lot of different ways to record what data you're observing, including drawing diagrams. The participants are not self-reporting to you. They're not filtering through themselves what they're going to let you know. You get to choose. And each author, the primary authors, Mills and Mertler, had different ways of talking about, of categorizing the types of observation, but they're pretty similar. On one end, you have being passive or being structured, which means that you are purely observing and not teaching. At the other end of the spectrum, you're an active participant, or it's an unstructured observation, where which is the most common, which is where you're just teaching and then observing what's going on from here and there and recording what's going on, and then you have what's in between that. It is often considered qualitative, and Mertler takes it a step farther and explains it as it's more of a story, it's a narrative, it's more of a description of what's going on. I think that observations get more at behavioral questions. So how do students look when they're processing information? How are they talking to each other? What's the pace of their reaction? What expression is coming across their face? I think I would also add to this that it can show you the process of learning, not just the end result of learning. How are students building knowledge? How do they ask questions? How are they not asking questions? How are they exploring, discovering? How are they doing hands-on learning and projects as well? Observations can have some strengths. You actually are seeing how students respond to information, and not just the end product. You get to see a lot of different aspects of the participants, their attitudes, perhaps. Again, it's not, I didn't mention it yet, but there is no guarantee, though. I think that point I've made several times. I think this was a really good point by Mertler, that students might not even see themselves doing these things. They might not even realize that, they raise their hand every 30 seconds, or that they turn their eyes away from the teacher every time they don't know what to answer. Little things they might not even know about themselves. And you can use a video recording possibly to make this a heck of a lot easier. You're seeing things happening naturally. It might be an organic process, and it gives you a wider scope to interpret the information. And Macmillan states that it is possible to do a quantitative observation where you're just recording numbers. There are a lot of weaknesses, unfortunately. I liked Mill's story about, trying to constantly record everything that you're seeing to the point where you might not actually be seeing much of anything because you're too focused on trying to record it all, so you can't really get it all. A teacher might be biased or might be too familiar with their own classroom to really effectively observe potentially important details. I wanted to add that in this hybrid schedule, and some teachers aren't even doing in-person classes, it's a lot harder to do observations right now. Students might, in the realization that they're being observed, might behave differently. And there's no guarantee that you're actually going to see what you're trying to see. The behavior just might not occur. The observer might be biased. Maybe they think my class is awesome, so anything negative, they're just going to kind of write it off. If you're not careful with how you take notes, it can get messy, and it might not reflect what has actually happened in the classroom. And even if you try to record it digitally, you might not get a good recording. It might be muffled. There might be so much background noise that you can't even hear what's going on. Mertler made a point of showing a way to, write facts and then write your comments off to the side. Not all the authors agree on that, though. The Macmillan text that I grabbed from my research methods class for this kind of added that there are a lot of issues because with something like this, you might be observing non-cognitive traits, so things that aren't straightforward, summative, fact, learning and end product assessment writing. So there was this differentiation between low inference and high inference observations. So low inference is kind of what it sounds to be. Low inference means it's more factual. Teacher wrote photosynthesis on the board 2 times, once in definition, once in example, like something very straightforward and factual. Or there might be an observation where that's really more inference. It's not really factual at all. There's this concept of contamination where you're making these observations, and because you already know what your study is about and what you're trying to look for, you might contaminate the results of the study. And then there's this thing called a halo effect, which basically means that you get this initial impression of what it is you're observing or who it is you're observing, and then it colors your perspective of what's happening. So you might observe a teacher who is really sweet at the beginning of class, and you're like, oh, that's really nice, I like that teacher, and you just think that everything that teacher does then from that point on is great, and it has an effect. Maybe you just ignore the negative things happening in the classroom because of that. What concerns do I have? Well, based on the reading, I think, unfortunately, while I really like observation, I think it has trouble with validity. There's no guarantee that you're going to observe a behavior that you might be trying to, maybe you've decided there's a correlation between engagement and the instructional method, and you're looking for behaviors to verify that, and you just can't see it because it's an unpredictable behavior. And, especially if you're looking for something relating to attitude, something that you have to observe that requires you to infer instead of write down, something that's more of a factual observation, which is what observation is supposed to be. Reliability, again, you might see the behavior like once and it might not come up again, or maybe the student, I know this student is always acting out, and then, you go to do your study and suddenly they act differently, and it could have to do with something else in the student's life. There's no guarantee that you're going to see something consistent happening, because again, it's more about often is about non-cognitive things, so it doesn't have to be. I think there are a lot of ethical concerns here. potential for it. Teachers, we might be biased in our classrooms, or maybe it could go the other way as well. What if we're paranoid and we're, we are trying to record everything we can and just can't write it all down, or maybe we're spending all of our time looking at one student and not looking at another. The author Dana brought up this idea that another teacher can come and observe. I'm not sure if that's really a possibility, and to use the field notes from another teacher while we are teaching. I think that would be great if that's possible, but there's a lot of potential issues with validity, reliability, and ethics as well for that. And these are my references. I'm sorry they're not perfect. I wasn't sure which book by Mertler, because I couldn't find one published in 2017. I'm imagining it was a different edition. So, all right. Thank you very much.